You ever have one of those moments where you think, yeah, this is totally fine, no big deal, only for it to spiral into something insane? That's exactly what happened to me when I agreed to help a stranger with the simplest favor imaginable. It all started on a regular Wednesday evening. I had just gone off work, exhausted and mentally drained, when I decided to stop by a small cafe near my apartment for a quick coffee. Stood in line, scrolling through my phone, I noticed a guy ahead of me shifting nervously from foot to foot. He looked completely normal, mid-30s, clean-shaven, wearing a dark green hoodie and jeans, but there was something about him that felt off. When he got to the register, he patted his pockets, his expression turning into one of mild panic. "Crap," he muttered under his breath, then turned toward me with an apologetic smile. "Hey man, I hate to ask, but I left my wallet at home. Do you spot me for coffee? I can Venmo you right after." It wasn't a big deal, $5. I've done it before for random people in line, and most of the time they either paid me back or at least said thanks. So I shrugged and said, "Yeah, no problem," paid for his drink, and went back to checking emails while I wait for mine. That should have been the end of it, except when the guy got his coffee, he didn't just leave. Fred awkwardly near my table, hesitating like he wanted to say something. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Hey, thanks again. Actually, I was wondering if you could do me one more favor." I looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Depends on what it is." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's nothing crazy, I just need you to hold on to this for me for a little while." And then, without waiting for my response, he slid a small, unmarked envelope across the table. I blinked. "Dude, what?" "It's for a little while," he repeated, his voice lower, now more urgent. "I promise it's nothing illegal, I just need someone I can trust to keep it safe. I'll come back for it later." And before I could protest, he grabbed his coffee and walked out the door. I stared at the envelope, my stomach twisting in knots. I should have left it there. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And that's where everything went wrong. I sat there, staring at the envelope like it was a live grenade. The coffee was getting cold, the cafe noise around me fatting into a dull hum as my brain tried to process what had just happened. I mean, what kind of guy asks a total stranger to hold on to something for him? What if it was something illegal? What if this was some kind of setup? I hesitated for a solid minute before reaching for it. The envelope felt normal. Thin. Probably just some papers inside. Okay, maybe it was nothing. I glanced at the door, half expecting the guy to come running back in, laughing, telling me this was some weird social experiment or prank. But he was long gone. I had two choices: leave it on the table and pretend this never happened, take it with me and wait for him to come back. And for some reason, some stupid reason, I went with option 2. I got home, I tossed the envelope on my kitchen counter and tried to go about my evening like normal. Made dinner, watched some Netflix, pretended I wasn't hyper-aware of that stupid thing sitting there like a ticking time bomb. By the time I was getting ready for bed, curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I wasn't going to open it. That would be weird. Invasive. Then, at 2 a.m., I opened it. Inside were 3 things: a single key, old and slightly rusted. Fold-up piece of paper with an address written on it. A Polaroid picture of a door, just a regular nondescript door. That was it. No explanation, no note, just this. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. What the hell had I got myself into? Maybe this was some kind of scavenger hunt or a test. Maybe the guy would show up tomorrow and be like, "Congrats, you passed. Here's $1,000 for playing along." Or maybe I had just made a very bad decision. Should have tossed everything in the trash right then and there. Instead, the next morning I went to the address. I'll be honest, I half expected to type the address into Google Maps and find out it was some random parking lot or an abandoned warehouse. Maybe even just an empty lot. But when I punched it in, something weirder happened. Nothing came up. Not a single search result. No business listings, no apartment complexes, no old news articles, just nothing. I double-checked, triple-checked. Even tried different spellings, just in case I had misread something. Still nothing. Okay, weird but not impossible. Maybe it was just a private residence, something not listed online. So I got in my car and started driving, figuring I'd find it manually. That turned out to be a mistake. The neighborhood I drove into wasn't bad, exactly. But it had that eerie, half-forgotten feel, like a place that had been left behind while the rest of the city kept moving forward. Streets were cracked. The houses looked old, not just in the charming historical way, but in the nobody's live here for years way. A lot of windows were boarded up. A few houses had overgrown yards like they hadn't been touched in decades. And yet, as I followed the numbers looking for the one on the paper, I kept hitting dead ends. Literally. Every time I got close, the street would just stop. Either I'd run into a fence, a brick wall, or a dead-end road that wasn't on the map. Numbers on the houses skipped over the one I was looking for like it had been erased from existence. I pulled over, staring at the address again. Maybe I had misread it. I was about to turn around when I noticed the old man. He was standing on the sidewalk, leaning on a wooden cane. Probably in his late 70s, wearing a flat cap and a thick brown coat despite the warm weather. He was watching me. I don't know why, but something about him made me roll down my window. "Hey," I called out. "Looking for this address." I held up the paper, half expecting him to shrug and walk away. Instead, his face changed, like I had just said something I was supposed to say. "You need to leave," he said immediately. "Now," I blinked. "Oh, what?" He pointed down the street. "Turn around, don't come back." Okay, that was unsettling. "Look, you won't find it," he interrupted. "Because it's not there." That made no sense. "But it's written down, it has to be somewhere." Old man took a deep breath like he was debating something. Then he sighed. "People don't write down that address," he muttered. "They whisper it. If you got it on paper, that means someone wants you to go there, and that's bad." I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. "Why?" He looked at me like I was an idiot. "Because no one who goes looking for that place ever comes back the same." I wanted to laugh it off. Just some creepy old superstition, right? The way he said it, the certainty in his voice, sent a chill through me. I almost listened. I almost put my car in reverse and drove home, but I didn't. Instead, I turned the corner one last time, and that's when I saw it. A house that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just old, it was wrong. The kind of house that made your stomach twist the moment you laid eyes on it. It sat at the very end of the dead-end street, leaning slightly to one side, as if it had been dropped there and left to rot. Roof sagged. The paint had long peeled away, exposing warped wooden planks underneath. The front porch was crooked, the railing half collapsed, like no one had stepped on it in years. But the worst part, the windows, they were pitch black. Not just dark, not just covered in grime, black like gaping holes in the wood, like the house itself was staring back at me. I had been up and down this street 5 times. I knew this house hadn't been here before, and yet here it was. Perfect match to the address on the paper. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave, to turn around and forget I had ever come here. But I couldn't, because now I had to know. I reached for the door handle and stopped. This was how horror movies started. This was how idiots got themselves killed. I was not about to be that guy, so instead of playing detective by myself, I did what any reasonable person would do. I went home. I called my friends. I didn't even have to beg my friends to come with me. When I told them the whole story, how the address shouldn't exist, how some creepy old man just happened to know a terrifying legend about the place, how the house itself looked like something out of a nightmare, they were in. Well, mostly in. Ryan, my best friend since high school, was immediately down. He lived for weird stuff like this. If there was even a hint of the paranormal, he wanted to see it for himself. Dude, he said, barely containing his excitement. If this is a haunted house situation, we need equipment. He was already on his phone, Googling EMF detectors and thermal cameras like we were about to film an episode of Ghost Hunters. Mia, on the other hand, was less enthusiastic. This is stupid, she muttered, crossing her arms. You probably just wrote the address down wrong, or you imagined the whole thing. Or, she gestured vaguely, something. Was the type to entertain conspiracy theories, logical to a fault. But even she couldn't resist a good mystery, and after a little convincing and a promise of free dinner afterwards, she agreed to come along. So the next day we packed into Ryan's car and drove to the same dead-end street. And the house was gone. Not abandoned, not boarded up, not even just a cleared lot. Gone like it had never been there in the first place. I swore. No way, it was right here. In this exact spot, I saw it. Ryan got out of the car, packing in the empty space where the house should have been. This is insane, he said, scanning the area like the house might just be hiding behind a bush or something. Maybe you did mess up the address. I didn't. My voice was sharp, too sharp. I know what I saw, Mia sighed. Well, we're looking at a whole lot of nothing right now, so unless you can prove this house exists, I think we should just drop it. Ryan hesitated, glancing at me. Could tell he wanted to believe me, but even he looked uncertain now. And honestly, I didn't blame him, because as I stood there staring at the empty lot where the house should have been, a terrible thought crept into my head. Had I imagined it? Had I fallen for some elaborate prank? Had I somehow convinced myself of something that wasn't real? In the end, there was nothing we could do. No house meant no mystery. No mystery meant no reason to stick around, so we left. Drove to a diner, ordered burgers, and tried to pretend the whole thing never happened. Tried to pretend I hadn't completely lost my mind. And for a while, it almost worked. Almost. The ride back from the diner was quiet. Not awkward quiet, just a weird, heavy silence, like none of us really wanted to talk about what had just happened. Ryan kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror like he was trying to figure out if I was screwing with him. He had her earbuds in, pretending she wasn't still low-key freaked out. And me? I just sat there, staring at the unopened envelope in my hands, the envelope with the key inside. It felt heavier now, like it had soaked up all my doubts, all my paranoia. Like if I held on to it for too long, it would pull me into whatever insanity I had gotten myself tangled in. I didn't want it anymore. Drove along the coastal road, I spotted a narrow lookout point up ahead, a small break in the guardrail where the cliffside overlooked the ocean. Pull over, I said suddenly. Ryan frowned. Huh? Just pull over for a sec. He did. The three of us got out, sang into the cool night air. The wind was strong up here, salty and sharp, whipping against my face as I walked to the very edge of the cliffside. I took one last look at the envelope, then I tossed it. It spun in the air, a small white blur against the darkness before vanishing into the waves below. That's it, Mia asked, watching it disappear. That's it, I said, brushing my hands off. No more weird houses, no more creepy keys, no more overthinking, it's gone. Ryan gave a low whistle. Damn dramatic much. Just being thorough, I said, forcing a grin. Come on, let's go home. And that was the end of it, at least that's what I thought. The next few days were off. Couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was subtle at first, like a quiet hum in the back of my mind. Little things, a shadow in the corner of my eye when I walked down the street. The feeling of someone's gaze following me just out of sight. A brief encounter with someone in a coffee shop who looked way too familiar, but when I looked back, they were gone. I tried to push it aside. I convinced myself it was just the paranoia getting to me. For all who wouldn't feel a little off after throwing a weird key into the ocean and receiving a note written in their own handwriting. But the feeling persisted. I started to notice people looking at me a little too long. Not in a way that was overt or threatening, but just enough to make me uneasy. I'd see faces in the crowd, strangers on the street, people at work, the guy in the grocery store, and for a split second, I'd think I recognized them. But then they'd move on, and it would all slip away. Could have sworn I saw one of them following me home one night, a man in a dark coat, walking a few steps behind me down the sidewalk. But when I turned around, he wasn't there. It was like they were always just out of reach, like a bad dream that wouldn't let me wake up. I tried telling myself it was just stress, that I was working too much, that maybe the weirdness of the key and the note had just gotten to me more than I realized. But the feeling didn't fade. Night, as I was sitting at home, scrolling through my phone, I heard a soft knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I got up cautiously, my pulse quickening, and opened the door. No one was there. But on the doorstep was a single piece of paper. It was folded neatly, almost too neatly. I unfolded it with trembling hands. The note read, "You're not done yet." I couldn't explain it, but I just knew. The people who were following me weren't just random strangers. They knew something. What did they want from me? And what the hell did that note mean? I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. Maybe I was just overthinking it all, letting my fear get the better of me. But the feeling never went away. The weight in my chest, the eyes on my back, the constant dread that something was about to happen. The strangest part, no matter how many times I told myself it was just paranoia, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, waiting for me. It was only a matter of time before they came for me.